The Vanishing Triangle refers to an area of Ireland where women mysteriously disappeared during the 90s. The most accepted number is 6, but researching I found way more. 15 missing or murdered women from that time frame all were within that triangle. There are several theories on it and it's hard to research without forming opinions, so as we go along I'm going to share mine, but they are just thoughts and observations like many others have imparted. So the official 6 are Annie McCarrick, Jojo Dollard, Fiona Pender, Fiona Sinnott, Keira Breen and Deirdre Jacob. So to me only 3 of these, or at a push 4, fill the criteria of the Vanishing Triangle, whereas there are 5 or 6 more that would make logical sense to me to be included. Ruling out Patricia O'Toole, who was murdered in August 1991 and her remains found at the Dublin Mountains, of which you are going to hear mentioned a lot. Although it bears a lot of resemblance to other cases, her killer was arrested very quickly in September 1991. This rules him out from all the other murders of the decade. I'm also ruling out Reynard Murray, who was killed near her home in Glenageary, South Dublin in 1999. Although it's close by to the area in question, her murder was very different in style, as she was stabbed and left for dead in a public place, unlike the others who were never found or found concealed in a particular type of terrain. I'm on the fence regarding Marie Kilmartin. She went missing in December 1993 after a Christmas party and her body recovered in a marshy bogland in 1994. Several of the vanished women disappeared at this time of the year and the terrain where she was discovered fits. However, the time of year may be more opportunistic rather than a pattern. As it's winter, with dark evenings, people are less observant, with thoughts of Christmas and festivities on their mind. Marie suffered with anxiety since being hospitalised in a psychiatric unit for running away from a mother and baby home while pregnant. She was the type of woman who absolutely would not have been wandering around by herself or associating with strangers. She received a phone call which caused her to be visibly upset. She went out and was never seen again. An unknown male was seen leaving the phone box where that call originated from, and it seems likely that it was someone known to her that she met up with. It was not far from where one of the 6 Vanishing Triangle victims went missing from, but there seems to be no connections between anyone they knew. Fiona Pender disappeared in 1996 from Tullamore, which is in the Midlands, near Portlaoise where Marie disappeared from, but she is one that I also feel has a possible explanation. In fairness, these 2 locations are not that close to most of the others, which are more South Dublin, Wicklow, Kildare and Carlow. So Fiona Pender was 7 months pregnant, engaged to a guy named John Thompson. They were living together. She was very excited about her new baby despite the shadow of her brother having been killed in a motorcycle accident not long before. Her partner went to work, reported she was still in bed, but stayed away that night. The following day she was gone. No trace of her was ever found. The only leads that turned up was a witness who claimed to have seen 2 men in a 4x4 carrying a carpet out of her building, and a wooden cross that appeared on a mountainous area with her name on it. The area where the cross was placed was searched to no avail. Her partner moved to Canada, married and had kids. In 2014, a woman in Canada went to police alleging sexual and physical assault by her husband. In the course of this investigation, she revealed that her partner had told her that he had murdered Fiona and offered a location to where she might be buried. An extensive search proved fruitless, and to date no charges have been brought against this man. So for this reason, I feel that there is a suspect that was someone close to her. Now I'm going back to 1979. Although out of her time frame, Phyllis Murphy disappeared from a bus stop in Newbridge, County Kildare, so this is definitely in the danger zone. It's Christmas. Her body was recovered a month later in the Wicklow Mountains. A man has been convicted of her murder, John Crare, who came on the Garda's radar through child molestation, and a hunch one particular guard had was able to match his DNA with semen found on the body of Phyllis. The interesting thing about this is that he wasn't apprehended into custody until 1999, and this fits with the timeline of when the disappearance stopped. I would be at a total loss if Gardaí had not looked into the possibility that he could be implicated in another official Vanishing Triangle woman, Deirdre Jacob, who went missing in the very same town in 1998. She had just returned from college in the UK. She went into the town about a mile walk from her family home and was captured on CCTV going to the post office, AIB bank and paid a visit to her grandmother's shop. She began her walk home but never made it there. She was in fact seen by 8 verified witnesses on her way home, and one sighting was 200 yards from her house before she literally disappeared into thin air. A huge suspect in this case was a nasty piece of work called Larry Murphy, nicknamed the Beast of Baltinglass. There was a much spread rumour that he had done work in Deirdre's grandmother's shop, giving him opportunity, but the family later denied this was true. So although it may have been him, there's no specific evidence linking him to it. Another disappearance that has been linked to Murphy is that of Jojo Dollard, although her sister disputes this, saying it's a man who is well known and that police have refused to investigate. This is down to her hiring a private detective. It is again the run-up to Christmas, and Jojo, who lives in Callan, County Kilkenny, a county adjoining Kildare, was in Dublin. She missed the last bus and decided to take a bus to Naas, 65 kilometres from her home, and hitchhike the rest of the way back. Now this is a fair distance to hitchhike, especially as it was after 10 p.m. on a dark, wet night, but not that unusual in the context of the time. Back then in Ireland, public transport to rural areas was sparse, and thumbing a lift was something a lot of people done, especially as there were not that many women who drove, or if they did, there would only be one car in the house, often being in use by someone else for work. I myself hitched everywhere back then. You never ever thought it was dangerous. You might get an old fella who'd try it on, but most be persuaded easily enough by saying you were married or engaged. Jojo rang her friend from a payphone in a small village called Moon in County Kildare at about 11:40 p.m. to tell her where she was, and then announced there was a car coming, in which she felt certain she would get a ride. This was the last confirmed sighting. There were a couple of potential sightings, one being in another village en route. So, on to the most infamous case of the Vanishing Triangle, which is American student Annie McCarrick. Annie was the only daughter of a New York policeman and had always had an obsession about Ireland. She thought it was an idyllic place to live. This was her second stint of living here. She had a flat shared with 2 other girls in Sandymount, South Dublin. On a Friday in March, she ran some errands, went to the AIB bank and then took 2 buses to a small village at the foot of the Dublin Mountains called Enniskerry. She reportedly went into the post office before assumingly going on a hike, like she had told her friends. She had asked a friend to go with her, but she had turned down the invitation. So here's where it all seems odd. She isn't spotted again until approximately 9 to 11 p.m, where she entered a pub called Johnny Fox's, 3 miles from Enniskerry, with an unknown man who pays for her cover charge. After that, no one has ever seen or heard from her again. Speculations have been made that after her friend declined, she made plans with someone else, but none of her friends had any information at that time on her being in any kind of relationship. She was a very social person, so it isn't beyond probability that he could have been someone she met on her excursion. There is, of course, no proof the man in the pub was responsible for her disappearance, although he never came forward, which is suspicious. But it could be that he was married and didn't want to be identified. Is it possible she also hitchhiked that night after closing time? I mean, how else did she intend to get home? If she were meeting someone who drove, why would she have needed to get a bus? The sad thing is that Annie had a car herself, so could have driven, but she was not a confident motorist. Another interesting observation is that she had gone into a post office and an AIB bank, different branches though, before she disappeared, just like Deirdre Jacob. Could these places be where a serial killer stalked his victims? One of the disappearances not always included in the Vanishing Triangle 6 is Imelda Keenan. She literally disappeared outside the post office she was going to in the middle of the day. Little is known about this case apart from that she told her boyfriend she was going to the post office, was seen in the town, then she was gone. Waterford is quite a distance from the others, but if the killer drove, perhaps he was just in the area that day and saw an opportunity. 3 months after Annie's disappearance, very close by, a woman called Eva Brennan vanished in Rathgar. She had been to lunch with her parents, returned to her flat, and a day or 2 later, after breaking down the door, her dad discovered her missing. Her bag was gone, so it looked like at some stage she had gone out, never to return. Police did not take this seriously at all, as Eva suffered with depression, but was not suicidal. If she had taken her own life, it's likely her body would have been found at some point, but it never has been. Police did not examine her flat or upgrade her disappearance until 3 months later. This enraged her family, as Eva was not given the same level of priority that Annie was given. despite this being 2 women gone in a very short time in close vicinity of the Dublin Mountains. Yet the remains of another woman 2 years before in 1991 had been recovered in these very same mountains. Patricia Doherty from Tala, who had gone to get Santa hats for her kids 2 days before Christmas, vanished and was then found dead. It's clear that this area is not a safe place to be out and about as a lone female, yet at that particular time I did it on a frequent basis. I'm feeling very blessed right now that I was not in the wrong place at the wrong time. The next case I feel certain should not be included in the Vanishing Triangle. Keira Breen, 17, from Dundalk with an only child. She lived way out of the area, more towards the north. Her story is very different in that she sneaked out of her bedroom window between 12 and 2. Her mother discovered what she had done, but when she didn't come home the next day, raised the alarm. It transpired Keira had been hanging around with a group of friends that had a reputation for drinking in remote places and drug taking. A man from that group was arrested twice, but died from an overdose in the cell the second time. An anonymous tip-off years later told police that she was buried in a marsh near their drinking spot, but she wasn't found. A local psychic found an old building full of cans and needles where he believes they were hanging out, and is convinced she met her fate there. It's possible that her death was accidental, maybe due to something she took, or a drug and alcohol-fueled fight. The others panicked and disposed of her to cover it up. It wouldn't be the first time this kind of incident happened. The last of the official 6 is Fiona Sinnott. I have doubts too about her link to the Vanishing Triangle. Fiona was a single mum with an 11-month-old daughter. She had been in a very abusive relationship with the child's father, resulting in multiple hospital visits. They had broken up and Fiona was renting a house in a small village in County Wexford. The child's grandparents on the father's side regularly minded the baby, but apparently did not like Fiona much. The weekend she disappeared, they had the child, and Fiona made the best of her free time. The night before, she went to a disco with her friends and met a long-distance lorry driver from Wales. They went back to the cab of his truck, but soon after, aggressive tapping on the window showed that her ex was jealous and had not accepted her moving on. The truck driver was concerned for her safety, so insisted on taking her home. The next day, she went to a pub a couple of miles away from where she lived. She was not intoxicated, it was just a chilled night with pleasant conversation. Her ex-boyfriend was also at that bar, drinking alone. Whatever happened, they left together. She had a 45-minute walk in the dark on country roads to get home, so perhaps she just fancied a bit of company. He reports that she said she was feeling unwell, with a pain in her arm and upper body. She went to bed and he slept on the couch. The next morning, his mother collected him. It's unclear why she did not drop the child back as normal. Fiona had stated she was going to hitchhike to the doctors, again not unusual back then. And that was it, she was gone, like all the others. Whether she hitchhiked or not, we don't know, but she never attended the doctors. She wasn't reported missing for well over a week, as she only really had contact with her family weekly. There were very few mobile phones back then, and Fiona, being on a low income, didn't have a landline. When they didn't see her for the second week, they reported it. Now, I'm confused why the grandparents with the baby didn't realise something was up, as it was very out of character for her not to have the child. What makes this less like the others and more pointing in the direction of one man in particular is that during this week, someone went into her house, put all her stuff into black sacks and illegally dumped it. Gardaí said the house had been cleaned out so well it looked like it was vacant. This was definitely a bit to make it look like she had left by choice, maybe even with the lorry driver, but she didn't, as he panned out to be legit. The farmer who found the sacks on his land burned them as litter, as he didn't know she was a missing person. A number of years later, 2 people came forward, saying that they were parked along the route she walked home that night, and they heard a female screaming. They didn't do anything, as they were having an affair and didn't want to get caught, which is kind of low. At this point, they were no longer married to the partners of that time. The grandparents kept Fiona's baby, and her family didn't get custody, which makes the story even sadder. Marilyn Rynn was murdered in December 2005 in the city's north side, raped, strangled and dumped on waste ground. Her killer was apprehended and was the first ever convicted in Ireland by DNA. While at first glance this seems totally unrelated, until you discover that David Lawler, her killer, is a first cousin of Larry Murphy, the Beast of Baltinglass. I mean, yes, it could be a coincidence, but let me explain why I think it isn't. The first of the murders in this area was Phyllis Murphy in 1979, and was caught. But these two lads, Larry and Dave, would have been teenagers at this time. Could they have been excited by the thought of doing the same, talked about it, and eventually planned it a few years later? I've left this particular one till now, even though I think it was the first Vanishing Triangle case. Antoinette Smith. She was a mum of two and went to the David Bowie concert in Slane, and afterwards a nightclub in Dublin city centre. She wanted to party on after it closed, but her friend had enough and went on home. Wandering in the city alone, she met up